what point?
At some point, I forget when the statistics
could have been 10 years ago, could have been 20 years ago.
Let's go to my statistic. In Texas, in this year, 17,696 people who were in police custody at one point were transferred to ICE. The state of Texas, the localities of Texas honored the ICE detainers, and 17,000 people were detained without incident.
Hold on, I just want to know.
Without incident.
Of the people with detainers, are they currently in custody of the state?
At some point, these 13,000
because that would be super important if the argument is that.
Don't you understand? They were released. The whole freaking point is that these people were released.
Hold on a second, Joe.
You understand, right?
Don't get all worked up.
These people were here illegally, committed some crime, and then they were released.
Joe,
that's why they're not in prison.
Don't get all worked up. All I'm asking is,
you're arguing that they're not in prison. I'm saying that's right. They were released. They should have been detained by ICE.
Hang on a second.
In today's video, Abby Phillip shuts down Joe Borelli on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as a fiery clash breaks out over ICE enforcement, systemic injustice, and accountability. Abby Phillip presses Joe Borelli on the real-world impact of these policies, cutting through spin and forcing the focus back on facts, public trust, and democratic values. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Joe Borelli on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
Edge cliff in terms of the possibility of America sustaining itself as a social experiment in the best sense of just becoming an empire full of might and force. So when you niggerize a whole country, you start treating all of your citizens the way black folk have been treated for 250 years. So when I see the police killing these two precious folks, Sister Renee and my dear brother Alex, and I've had so many partners killed by the police growing up on the chocolate side of town, right? What has been the response? Thank God for Martin King. How do we learn how to love in the face of this hatred? How do we learn how to fight for freedom for everybody in all parts of town in the face of all of this terror? And America now has the blues. If you don't learn something from the best of the blues people, we're going to lose the democracy. So this is not just about meticulous details. We're talking about something huge at stake.
It does seem that we are at a critical moment where there's a real question about whether ICE needs to be reined in. That's a question being asked by Republicans and by Democrats. And if so, how? Let me play what Elizabeth Warren said about what Democrats need to do in this moment.
Democrats are ready to rein in this rogue agency, but we need Republicans in Congress to stop this violence as well. And I know that there are Republicans right now who are seeing what we're seeing in Minnesota, and they know it is wrong. It is time to speak out. Silence is complicity. Grow a spine, show some backbone. Being disturbed doesn't change anything.
Some Republicans are speaking out, whether it's Tom Tillis or that candidate who was running for governor in Minnesota who dropped out of the race over this issue, to the top appropriator in the House who's basically saying, yeah, we do need to reset the situation. Is that right? Is that the right place to be right at this moment? I mean, do we need to rethink what ICE is really doing in the streets of America?
Moments like this feel less like politics and more like a stress test for the country's moral core. When institutions lean harder on force than fairness, history shows trust collapses fast. You can see it in data. Nations with high police violence and low accountability consistently rank lower in social stability and economic mobility. That's not ideology, that's pattern recognition. When communities believe the system treats them as threats instead of neighbors, cooperation drops and unrest rises. The warning signs aren't abstract. They show up in shortened life expectancy, school-to-prison pipelines, and whole neighborhoods living under constant surveillance, daily realities. Calls to rein in enforcement agencies aren't radical, they're rooted in constitutional basics. Oversight is literally Congress's job, and every major federal agency, from the FBI to the Pentagon, operates under review mechanisms because power without guardrails drifts toward abuse. Reports from Watchdog groups have flagged detention conditions, due process gaps, and the expansion of private detention contracts where profit incentives can clash with human rights standards. Even conservative jurists have warned that unchecked executive enforcement erodes federalism and local trust. When lawmakers from different parties admit a reset is needed, that's not weakness, it's the system trying to self-correct in real time. What keeps a democracy alive isn't just laws, but civic habits, mutual care, protest, and the stubborn belief that strangers deserve dignity. Research on non-violent movements shows they succeed more often than violent ones and leave behind stronger democratic institutions. That's because they widen participation instead of narrowing it to whoever has the most weapons. Cultures that turn pain into art, humor, and solidarity, think spirituals, labor songs, community mutual aid networks, have historically fueled reform waves, from labor rights to civil rights. Choosing empathy over dehumanization isn't soft. It's a long-term survival strategy for pluralistic societies. History suggests this path bends toward justice.
Clearly, the president thinks there needs to be some recalibration, right? He replaced the leadership in Minnesota with Tom Homan, a change of sort of the direction at the top. You saw him pull back and ask for these DHS agents to be investigated. Ultimately, though, the president's goal, and I think Tom Homan's mission, is to get compliance in the jails, in the system, in the prison system in Minnesota. Right? This is not a crisis of anything but a crisis of cooperation, where for the most part you have other states where the number of ICE detainees is 10, 11, 12 times higher than in Minnesota, where there is zero incident. Texas, more than 10 times more ICE detainers in Texas, yet zero incidents. No one's getting shot.
There are 200 undocumented immigrants, non-citizens, in Minnesota prisons. Is that what you're talking about?
1,361 detainers.
Okay,
of people that were actually arrested at some point and then released. I'm not saying who's in jail
what
now.
exactly do you want the governor to do? You want the governor to go to those people's houses, take them out of their homes, and hand them over to ICE?
As they were
arrested. What would you like them to do?
An ICE detainer means as they were arrested.
Over the course of what period of time?
Over the past year, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, don't you think that's relevant information?
It's working in Texas.
1,300. Hold on.
In Texas, they got 17,696.
I'm just concerned about the factual information here. You're talking about a list of 1,300 people. There are only 200 non-citizens in the prisons. The Hennepin County Jail, which doesn't cooperate with ICE, has a max capacity of about 600 people. So where are these 1,300 people? How long has it been since they've been in some form of prison? And what exactly do you want the Governor Walz to do about it?
I'm more familiar with here in New York, just being a New Yorker. Rikers Island has about 3,000 people at any one time.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Minnesota.
In the course of a year,
what do you want
30,
the governor
40,000
to
people go through a jail.
Do you want the governor to go door to door and pick up people who had committed crimes years ago?
Now, let's understand that there's a difference between
let's not
state prisons and the county jail.
Yes,
okay,
but I think my point is, here's my point, real quick. This is important. You can't throw out that number and say there are 1,300 people that are in prisons and they won't let them have it. That's actually not true at all.
Heated exchange like this get messy fast, but one thing that matters is whether the numbers actually mean what people imply they mean. Raw detention or arrest figures without timelines are basically statistical junk food. They sound big but tell you nothing about present risk. Criminal justice researchers constantly warn that stock numbers versus flow numbers change the story completely. Someone who had contact with law enforcement 10 years ago is not the same as an active public safety threat today. Blurring that line creates fear, not clarity, and policy built on fear usually overshoots reality in the real world. Cooperation between local authorities and federal agencies also isn't a simple on-off switch. Studies on community policing show that when immigrant communities believe any interaction could trigger deportation, reporting of violent crime drops, sometimes double digits. That makes everyone less safe, not more. Police chiefs in multiple cities have testified that trust is a force multiplier. People share tips, serve as witnesses, and prevent retaliation cycles. Turning local officers into de facto immigration agents can erode that pipeline. Public safety works best when priorities are focused on serious offenses, not broad dragnet approaches. History shows that balance matters most here. There's also a legal layer people skip. ICE detainers are requests, not criminal warrants, and several federal courts have ruled that holding someone solely on a detainer can raise Fourth Amendment issues. That's why many jurisdictions require judicial warrants before extended holds. It's not defiance, it's liability management and constitutional caution. Fiscal angles matter too. Wrongful detention lawsuits have cost counties millions. So the debate isn't just ideology, it's law, budgets, and risk. Precision beats rhetoric here, because durable policy comes from facts that hold up under scrutiny. Long-term legitimacy depends on rules people see as fair and consistent.
There are 1,300 people who were at one point detained by the police departments in Minnesota.
At what point?
At some point, I forget when the statistics
could have been 10 years ago, could have been 20 years ago. At what
Let's go to my
point
statistic.
does
In Texas,
Joe?
in this year, 17,696 people who were in police custody at one point were transferred to ICE.
Listen,
the state of Texas, the localities of Texas honored the ICE detainers, and 17,000 people were detained without incident.
Hold on, I just want to know.
Without incident.
Of the people with detainers, are they currently in custody of the state?
At some point, these 13,000
because that would be
people,
super important if the argument is that.
Don't you understand? They were released. The whole freaking point is that people were released.
Hold on a second, Joe.
You understand, right?
Don't get all worked up.
These people were here illegally, committed some crime, and then they were released.
Joe,
that's why they're not in prison.
I'm not getting all worked up. All I'm asking
You're arguing that they're not in prison. I'm saying that's right. They were released. They should have been detained by ICE.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. The state prisons. All right. Hold on. The state prisons, which holds a vast majority of people who committed crimes.
After they've been convicted.
Yes, which is a due process. If you've been convicted of a crime.
And ICE detainer happens at the time of arrest in the county jail.
Hold on a second, Joe.
Yeah.
Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
In the state prisons, they work with ICE. So when you have committed a crime and you are convicted of that crime, they will call ICE and say, hey, this guy is in here. They're about to get out. Come and get him. So that is happening. The question I'm asking you is that if you are arguing that the rationale for this show of force is because the state is not cooperating with getting people who are in prison into the hands of ICE, you have to actually prove that those people are in custody. And you can't do that. And neither can the Trump administration, because many of them, most of them, are not actually in custody. And they would have to do the very same thing that they are doing right now. They would have to go out and conduct targeted raids. And if they were to do that, no one would be complaining about that.
You gave an incredible speech about prison, right? We're talking about jails, people who are detained by police.
I am also talking about jails.
You said 300 people are in prison.
There are 600. There's the maximum capacity in Hennepin County. Do I get a chance? So there's 600 people. Where are all the people coming from?
1,361 people were issued ICE detainers in Minnesota and then were released by...
The first question should always be, what exactly is being counted? Criminal justice data has point-in-time counts and cumulative counts over years, and mixing those is like comparing a snapshot to a time-lapse. Someone briefly booked and released a decade ago is not the same as a current inmate the state is refusing to hand over. Policy experts call this denominator games, and it's one of the easiest ways to make routine churn in jail sound like an ongoing security failure. Precision matters, especially when force is the proposed solution. There's also confusion people have about jails versus prisons. Jails are short-term holding facilities with constant turnover. Millions cycle through US jails yearly, most not convicted of anything. Prisons hold sentenced individuals after due process. Cooperation policies often differ because legal status differs. Sheriff's associations have warned that holding people past release dates without judicial warrants exposes counties to constitutional claims. Several courts have agreed. That's why many places notify federal authorities but avoid extra detention time unless paperwork meets legal standards. That distinction isn't semantics. It's the boundary between civil immigration enforcement and criminal custody under the law. Public safety research adds another layer. When local systems are seen as extensions of federal immigration enforcement, immigrant communities report fewer crimes and witnesses step back, including in domestic violence and trafficking cases. Major city police departments have documented this chilling effect. Effective enforcement tends to prioritize serious offenders using targeted investigations, not broad sweeps based on old contact lists. That approach uses resources smarter and reduces collateral fear. So the core issue isn't refusal to cooperate, it's aligning enforcement with constitutional limits, liability realities, and strategies proven to keep communities both safe and willing to engage with law enforcement. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.